And let me just share a little quick story. First of all, just to open it up. And several years ago, I used to attend, before Biola University, I used to attend a secular college. And it's really sad, but in every single class there, they just make fun of religion and they make fun of Christianity all the time. And there was this one professor who was just making fun of, just talking down on Christianity. And so he was saying that Christians believe that there are three gods because of the, you guys heard of the Trinity before? And so as Christians, what do we believe? We don't believe in three gods. How many gods do we believe in? We believe in only one. And so he was saying that we believe in three gods. And so there was a girl in class who was a Christian, and she started to defend herself as a Christian. And she was saying that, no, we only believe in one God. And so the guy in front of that girl turns around, and he looks at her, and he says, well, what is your source of truth? And then she said, the Bible. And then the whole class started to laugh, right? And that's pretty sad, right? And so my roommate starts nudging me and says, defend her, Josh, because she's all by herself. And my professor was just pacing back and forth in the class, and he just kept going back and forth saying there is no such thing as absolute truth. There is no such thing as absolute truth. Now, before I continue the story, I have to define terms for those of you, just in case you might have a hard time with it. You guys know what absolute truth is? An absolute truth is something that is true for you, and it's also true for everybody in this world. So in other words, rape is wrong in every country. Murder is going to be wrong. Torturing babies for fun is always wrong. It doesn't matter what culture you're from. You see? And so in other words, truth never changes. Okay? Daniel's always going to be a boy. Right? Okay? No, I mean... Okay, so in other words, he kept pacing back and forth saying that there is no such thing as absolute truth. There is no such thing as absolute truth. And then this is where I got kind of nervous in class, and I raised my hand and I said, your statement doesn't make any sense when you said that there is no such thing as absolute truth, because that statement in and of itself is a truth statement. He's basically saying this: the truth is there's no absolute truth. Does that make sense? So it becomes contradictory. It becomes something called self-defeating. And so he was going on, and this is what he did when I said that. He went, yeah. And the whole class started to laugh. And I'm like, okay, he's going to fail me, right? And so after that, he says, okay, there is no such thing. Okay, we'll grant the truth, but then all truth is relative. You guys know what relative means? Relative means that it's whatever is true for you is true for you. Whatever is true for me is true for me. So it's whatever you want to believe. It's subject to your own opinion. And so I responded and I said, well, if everything is relative, why should I listen to you? Because that's your beliefs and I have my own now. Does that make sense? And then all of a sudden he said, well, truth is something that you pursue, but it's not something that exists. And, I didn't have to respond to that because that's just one of the dumbest statements that you could ever make. Why would you pursue something that does not exist? It's like saying, I want you to worship God even though there's no God out there. You see what I'm saying? And so after that, I won't get into the rest of the story, but let me give you one more. Because this is so prevalent within secular campuses. And so I go to my English class, the first day of class, and they give us a syllabus. And you guys know what syllabus is, and just gives all the information for what's going to be throughout the semester. And then my professor, as an English professor, says, I just hate it when those Christians think that they have the right interpretation of the Bible. Because you can interpret it any way you want. And so, the class was pretty much agreeing with the professor. And there was this one girl in class and says, yeah, isn't our interpretation of the Bible subject to our own opinion? And everyone's like, yeah, you can interpret the Bible any way that you want. And so I had a syllabus in my hand. And so I said, okay, if that's the case, your syllabus here says that we're going to have a test next week, but I'm going to interpret and say that we're not going to have a test next week. How's that? And he was like, oh. And he just started to fumble because he didn't know what to say. You guys, truth exists. And if truth didn't exist, me trying to talk to you about God and the Bible, it doesn't really make any sense unless we establish first that there is truth. You see, because if not, then we're just talking nonsense right now. But is there meaning though? You see, there's an apologist named Rabbi Zacharias. I don't know if Daniel's ever mentioned him to you, but Rabbi Zacharias is an Indian Christian apologist, and he was speaking at the University of the Philippines. And when he was there was this one Filipino guy just shot up out of his seat. He says, everything in life is meaningless. And then Rabbi said, you don't mean that. He says, yes, I do. He says, no, you don't. He says, yes, I do. He says, no, you don't. And they were going back and forth. And then Rabbi says, I'm assuming that what you just said is meaningful. And the guy said, what? He says, you heard me. I'm assuming that what you just said is meaningful. And if what you just said is meaningful, then not everything in life is meaningless. On the other hand, if everything in life is meaningless, then what you just said is meaningless too. And in effect, you have said nothing. You can sit down. Does that make sense? You guys, truth exists out there. And let me give you an example. I mean, just basically what my professor said, that there is no such thing as absolute truth. Someone will say, Josh, is there such thing as absolute truth? I could say, you want the right answer or the wrong answer? Because there is a right answer and there's a wrong answer. But if everything is relative, there is no right answer or wrong answer, because everything is subject to your own opinion. And so it's like saying this: I can't say a word in English. What did I just do? Said a word in English. No sentence is longer than 3 words. That's 7 words. I counted it earlier. Okay. Right? And so those are called self-defeating statements. They call it philosophical tar, because you make these philosophical statements and you get stuck on your own objections. Right? Look at this one. The statement that I am making right now is false. Now think about that. If that statement is true, it's actually false. But if that statement is false, it's actually true. Okay? Are you guys following along? Good. You see, and so people make weird statements like that, and they apply it to God, and they apply it to religion. So someone says, well, okay, Josh, you can't, I won't say, I'll just say you can't know anything. And I'll say, well, how do you know that? At least you know one thing, you know that you can't know anything, right? It says, well, you can't know anything for sure. And then I'll say, well, do you know for sure you can't know anything for sure? Right? And then they'll say, well, what do you mean? He says, well, if you know for sure that you can't know anything for sure, then you know something for sure. And if you know something for sure, you can't say that you don't know anything for sure. Okay, I know, it goes over your head. Right? Does that make sense? Now, someone will say, okay, I'm not going to go as far and say that you can't know anything for sure. I'm going to say that I don't know anything for sure to play it safe. I'll say, are you absolutely sure you don't know anything for sure? See? We know things for sure. Reality exists. If I were to say to somebody, say, do you exist? And they say, yeah, well then you know at least one thing for sure, you know that you exist, right? And you ask another person who's a smart aleck, say, do you exist? They say no. Well then you know one thing for sure, because you have to exist in order to deny your existence. You see what I'm saying? So actually when you're denying your existence, you're actually affirming it in your denial, because you have to exist in order to deny it. And so someone says, well, let's take it a step further, and someone says, you should be skeptical about everything, you guys. You should question all these things. Be skeptical about everything. What can you say? Should I be skeptical about that? Right? Or you should doubt everything. Should I doubt that? Does that make sense? Right? Or someone says, this is what I get a lot. Says, well, you shouldn't judge anybody. Especially when I'm debating with atheists, they would say, well, doesn't your Bible say that you shouldn't judge? Well, yes and no. In Matthew chapter 7, it says that we actually should judge, but you shouldn't judge hypocritically or self-righteously. If you didn't judge anybody, you shouldn't arrest anybody. If you want someone to, someone gets murdered or raped, just leave them. Don't judge them. But we judge people all the time. And I could say, well, then why are you judging me for judging if judging in and of itself is wrong? And it becomes self-defeating. Truth is disgustingly undeniable. Truth exists and meaning exists. What you guys are doing right now matters. Now imagine if you find out in this world that everything is meaningless. Just imagine that. Everything in life is meaningless. It would have been meaningless for you to even have found out that life is meaningless if everything is meaningless. I'm telling you guys right now that everything you're doing right now has meaning. You guys singing to Jesus matters. Okay? You guys praying to God matters if this stuff is true. If it's true. And now the question is, do we know it's true? And if you know something, you could explain it. I'll say, okay, explain the Trinity to me. We believe in one God, but there's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Okay, explain. And then eventually they don't know how to explain it, and I'll give them some grace, because the Trinity could be a very kind of hard subject to explain. But we need to start explaining these things, because that's why a lot of people don't want to become Christians, because we don't know what we believe. And so I remember there was one guy, I won't mention his name, one of our friends, they were doing evangelism one time, and they were sharing to a bunch of Muslims. And then the Muslim knew more than the Christian. And so the Muslim told my Christian friends, why don't you come back when you know your stuff? You see what I'm saying? Because we need to start knowing these things in order to show this world that we're not stupid.